So this video is how to prepare for the coming collapse again. Well, I don't want to say again, but yeah, I've made a couple of videos about that. You all should be super worried about the downgrading of the American bond reliability. If you're not following Ray Dalio, you should follow Ray Dalio. There's one of the things that I'm really working on is trying to get myself and other people to be more aware of their assumptions and cognitive biases. So one of the main cognitive biases that Ray Dalio speaks about a lot is this idea that if something doesn't happen in our lifetime, we just assume that it's not possible. So we've never seen a major world war in our lifetime, unless you're really old. We've never seen a major depression in our lifetime. We've never seen major famine or hunger in the United States. I mean, poverty aside, on a mass scale. So all of those things are real possibilities. And again, I can't even make a video without talking about Donald Trump, because he represents the ultimate cognitive biases that are driving us into these into these high-risk situations in which we're not necessarily we're not preparing. We're kind of going the opposite direction. So there's this idea. Again, I need to just apologize in advance to everybody who listens. Thank you so much for listening to this. I know there's value in these talks, but I do jump around a lot, because here's the thing. Everything's connected. So politics is connected to economics, is connected to ecology, is connected to personality, is connected to personal finance, is connected to emotional well-being, is connected to belief structures. They're all connected, so you can't really spread it apart. You have to think of things as an interconnected whole. You don't have to, but it's the way it works. And so if you really want to be in touch with reality, that is where you got to start from. I'm also highly caffeinated this morning. I really got fired up about the collapse thing because, let me see if I can backtrack here a little bit. So I started a bunch of points. So Donald Trump, he's an example of sort of the short-sighted, non-wisdom way that politics in America is going. And eventually it's going to implode or explode, one or the other. And we're fast tracking. He's fast tracking us towards that. We were kind of slowing it down, but now we're fast tracking towards that. So the downgrading of the U.S. bonds is another predicted. So if you follow Ray Dalio, that was a predicted outcome in the stage that we're in the rise and decline of monetary empires, in the debt cycle, in the business cycle. So we're in that ballooning debt cycle of a country, and it doesn't really, unfortunately, there's not an example in history where it's really turned around. It hasn't ever really happened. So we have to prepare. So what are you going to do to prepare? So you gotta, start following. Ray Dalio's a little bit, he doesn't really give you anything to do, which is kind of challenging. I keep looking for his stuff to try to figure out what to do, and he doesn't really tell you what to do. The only thing he'll tell you what to do as an investor is to find 15 uncorrelated assets or 15 uncorrelated stocks, and invest in those, so that then, since they're not correlated in any way, that you'll always be making money in the long run. But there's the standard stuff, like get some gold and all that kind of stuff. But more importantly right now, you got to focus on kind of the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are, how are you going to get, are you in debt? How are you going to get out of debt? Are you in variable interest debt? How are you going to get out of variable interest debt? You don't want to be in any variable interest debt when the monetary system starts going haywire. And then are you just in stocks? Are you in stocks and U.S. bonds? If your investments are in stocks and U.S. bonds, then in the long run, you're highly exposed. Because as a world order transition occurs, or if a monetary system readjustment or collapse occurs, like we're in the middle of, again, don't underestimate the power of the downgrade of the U.S. Treasury's risk factor. That's super, super important to pay attention to. So you want to, all right, how are you going to deal with a collapse? So for me, so those of you who have listened to my talks before, I like to slow down and focus. So I'm just gonna hit you with a few ideas of what you need to do, or what I'm doing. Let's just start with what I'm doing and go from there. So, man, I've been on this path for a long time, and people used to think I was crazy. Now they don't think I'm so crazy anymore. But I moved out to the woods. I got my 40 acres of land. It's only like, I don't know, maybe 2 acres of flat usable land. Most of it's just hillside. I can graze I can graze my goats in the hillside, which is nice. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, prepare for collapse. And it may or may not come. And so build a life that you love while preparing for collapse. So you're having the ultimate insurance policy. You divest yourself from the traditional sources of wealth and invest yourself in resilience sources of wealth. So, what's a simple thing to do? Dry food goods. A 6-month supply of dry food goods. I'm not real big on just like putting stuff in a freeze-dried thing and, saving it in the corner. And I suppose you can do that. But more importantly, I think, is to have, how they say to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses? Have 3 to 6 months of food and water and heat for the winter, candles or power or something like that, so you can weather transitions. So don't just have 3 to 6 months of money, because money is, we're looking at a changing order of money. I think this particular crisis point might level out a little bit, but then it's still, I don't think it's going to disappear. So 3 to 6 months, I don't even think that's enough. I would say 6 to 12 months of food. And that means protein, fats, and carbs. Focus on your proteins and your fats, like stable fats and stable proteins. Those are the hardest to come by. So then the other thing would be, to diversify your investment assets. And when I say diversify, I don't mean it in the way that, investors tell you to diversify. I mean to diversify out of the current economic system. So how do you diversify out of the current economic system? One way to do that would be to invest in hard asset tools, things like that. So things that are that produce something, like, let's say I was just thinking of one of those. I don't know if this is actually a good idea, but I was just thinking about, there's guys around here that have some of those old hay baling machines, and those are going to be more valuable in a world where fuel costs skyrocket, transportation costs skyrocket, those kind of things. Or in a conflict, when there's a time of conflict or a time of ecological crisis, chainsaws, tractors, battery operated tools. How about a little battery operated tool with a battery, with a solar battery charger? That's a great one. I'm going to look that one up tonight. Yeah, maybe I should try to find on my other construction YouTube channel, I should try to find a company that's making those and see if I can make a video about them. Okay, so diversify your assets. Try to get some harder assets. Heavy equipment tends to hold its value. As long as you can get diesel fuel, which is a question mark, you might not be able to get diesel fuel in the future. Who knows? Maybe not. I think a better asset would be like a battery operated tractor. That would be insane. I wonder if anybody's doing, I should look this up online, if anybody's doing retrofit tractor battery electric motor kits. So you could take an old tractor and swap in a high torque electric motor with a battery bank. That'd be pretty amazing. Solar power infrastructure. I wouldn't sign up with a purchase power agreement with some corporation, because they're going to go, who knows what's going to happen with them. PG&E or the various companies in California that are around the country, Sunrun and the other ones. Like, I don't know. I just wouldn't do that. I would try to get it myself, cobble together a small DIY system rather than have somebody else own it. And that's the other thing, like, get out of having corporations and banks loaning you money. Gosh, I'm not out yet, and boy, I'm trying hard. I got one investment property, and I'm just trying to get out right away. Let me tell you this, that I think this is really critical for you, for all of us. The book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, asks you to ask this one question. What one thing can I do in my life that's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? So, for example, in my life, I bought this investment property with a partner about 2 years ago. It sat for a year because I didn't have time to deal with it. And now it's just sitting there and it's sort of burning cash. The market's tanking. Our real estate market is tanking. And usually I would try to hold, in the past when things were more stable, I would hold my real estate investment for the long term. But now I don't think I'm going to do that, just because I don't trust the long-term stability of the economic system that we're in right now. I feel like it's better to sell even on a downturn. So my one thing is to sell my investment property. So what that means is that, other than like making sure I don't go bankrupt and making sure my family is good and my health is good, pretty much everything else is going by the wayside. And all I'm doing is putting all of my extra time and energy to finishing that project in the best way that I can. It's so frustrating when you lose a thought that was like right on behind the other thought, but now I got it back. So in terms of the one thing, you have to take care of your health. You have to take care of your relationships that are critical to you. You have to take care of your bottom line finances. But that's pretty much it. Those three things. It is limited. It's health, basic finances, and your basic, most important relationships. Other than those three, you can let everything else go and then focus on that one thing. So there's really 4 things. So I guess that's what I got a little pissed off about Gary Keller's One Thing book, because he kept saying the one thing, but then in the middle of the book he talks about those other things that you have to take care of. So it's always those 4 things at a minimum. And so you got to take care of those 4 things, but that one business or career thing, or whatever that thing is for you that's going to make everything else easier and necessary, that's the one thing you got to focus on outside of those 4 things. And you can focus on one thing inside of those 4 things. So for example, within my health, I think the one thing is managing sugar spikes. Well, it's hard to say. It's either managing my back health, making sure my back stays healthy, or managing sugar spikes. So you can't quite narrow everything down to one thing. It's a little too linear thinking, but you can at least get closer to that. So with health, for me, what I've come up with is managing sugar spikes and keeping my spine healthy. And then in relationships, it's really having quality, short one-on-one time with my wife and my daughter. That's it. Everything, and then the rest of the relationships are a little bit, I get them in when I can. And then finances, it's managing the budget, making sure that we have a budget. If you don't have a budget, have a budget. You have to have a budget. I'm sorry. If you don't have a budget, have a budget. Forget everything else that I've said here. Get a budget. You have to have a budget. I learned that the hard way, man. I didn't have a budget for years and paid the price. I'm still cleaning up the messes from not having a budget. And I would say my personal recommendation after trying several of them and really being committed to automation is Monarch Money. Just go get Monarch Money, plug everything in, learn it and use it. It's the best one. YNAB is too weird and complicated and all over the place. The other ones don't really give you enough functionality and control. So just use Monarch Money. Free plug for Monarch Money. Give me some commissions, although I don't have anything like that. It's a non-monetized channel at this point. Okay. So to survive the collapse, make a budget. Invest in hard assets, non-stocked, non-bonds, hard assets that retain their value. 6 to 12 months of food, 6 to 12 months of water, 6 to 12 months of energy. How are you going to get energy? 6 to 12 months of heat and cooling. Move away from corporate dependence. Notice everywhere that you're corporately dependent and get out of there. Corporations don't care about you. They really don't. And I don't know what we've become so complacent thinking that somehow a corporation is going to have our best interest in mind, but they just do not give a shit. And neither, there's good people inside of corporations that are trying to do the right thing here and there, but in general, this is something I haven't really talked about before for a long time. What's wrong with corporations and the public good is that the corporations are structured around 6-month profit margins for investors, or they're private and they're only focused around the private investor interest. Now, there's a really weird thing about that. I know I'm sidetracking a little bit, but I think this is important to understand. You're never really going to have a corporation that serves the interest, the public good, until it has a longer timeline. And then there is sort of a funny area where some private companies do a better job than corporations because of a more family-oriented, long-term plan. Some of them have a plan that's multi-generational. That's way preferable to a plan that's quarterly corporate profit driven. So our entire economic system is built on quarterly corporate profits, which is inherently a destructive system. It's never going to create a system which has the long-term benefit of the people and the planet at its core. It's always going to favor short-term benefits for long-term benefits, which is frankly just dumb. I mean, it's not. So, and I constantly, not constantly, but often I'll harp on this. We need a wisdom culture. We need a wisdom culture that runs our system, and we do not have one. And it's going to just keep getting worse and worse and worse until we realize that we need a longer term horizons. We need an internal emotional wisdom to be a driving force in our leadership culture. That's what's missing. We don't have any wisdom tradition in our leadership culture. You know, that's why the shamans were the leaders in a lot of indigenous cultures, because it's not just because, you know, people have this funny idea, especially in the mainstream, that shamans were just people who, you know, ate medicinal plants and had visions and did like wacko, not real healing ceremonies. That's completely incomplete. You know, every culture has their crazy belief structures. Everybody's nuts. Everybody believes all kinds of crazy stuff. And shamans are just an older example of what people believe. Let me say that again. You believe crazy shit. I believe crazy shit. Everybody believes crazy shit. And to think that your crazy shit is somehow superior to an older culture's crazy shit, it's just hubris. It's just, you're not seeing the forest through the trees. We're all context and culturally dependent, we live inside of this belief structure of our culture and our context. And that culture and that context gives you all kinds of crazy assumptions and ideas that really don't have anything to do with truth. They have everything to do with, like I said in the last talk, about identity. About you holding your identity consistent. You're not trying to get closer to the truth. You're not even trying to really make the world a better place, as much as you might be trying to you're always trying to make the world a better place, unless you're a psychopath. But more importantly, you're trying to feel justified in your ideas and in your body. That always comes first. Like it or not, it comes first. Look around you. Look around you. Everybody's doing it all the time. Very few people step outside of that. We all can occasionally at times. It's very difficult. But we all should be trying to do that more. That's wisdom culture, wisdom tradition. Oh my God, that sidetrack rant got me all off track. I don't know exactly where I was going, other than we need a wisdom culture. So I'm just going to circle back to what the talk is supposed to be about. Thank you for enduring my sidebars. Again, in my mind, they're all connected. So, food, diversified assets that are inside of the system. Get away from corporate dependence. Get away from mortgage and bank dependence. Don't tie, if you have some debt, you got to uncouple your hard assets from your debt. Don't have your debt tied to your hard assets. I don't know. I still have debt. Man, I want to get out of debt. I'm working at it. And I'm making it a priority, budgeting. So yeah, budget. If you got debt, let's get out together. So yeah, you got to prepare for the collapse, the recession and the collapse. And I think, the way, so another thing that you want to do is you want to put less energy into labor as your primary income drivers, because labor is going to get devalued. The value of labor is going to go down. So how are you going to do that? You need assets. And there's a lot, so I would invest my time and energy into digital assets that are educational based. If you know how to make sourdough starter than anybody else, then you make educational YouTube videos about sourdough starter. You know, if you know how to fix things, then, you know, make educational videos about teaching people how to fix things. Like, really you got to give people, you got to help people survive and thrive throughout the decline. The problem is the solution. So when you see the collapse coming, instead of focusing on the collapse, you want to focus what's after the collapse. What's after the collapse, one of the things that's after the collapse is a potential for a regenerative cooperative culture. So those of us in the regenerative permaculture, syntropic, solar punk, in that world, this is our time. This is when we need to build stronger ties with one another, build barter relationships with their neighbors, start building. So this, I think, other than having a budget, this would be number 2. And I'm slowly working on this one. I think this is the hardest one for us to learn. Build community networks. Start talking to your neighbors about, like, oh, you've got cows. Great, can I get on a cow share with you? Like, I've got goats. Maybe, you know, I could trade some goat milk, or for maybe you like goat milk and I like cow meat or something like that. Or, oh, I've got ducks. We've got ducks. You know, maybe you like duck eggs, and you know, you've got baking skills, so you can help bake goods for the community. You know, just start working through your local community and developing ties. So that is an example of a non-corporate hard asset. It's kind of a soft asset. Those network relationships between various people in your community, where you start building these alternative economic ties. So start building that. It's time to build the alternative economy, and build the alternative. Well, it was time a long time ago, but you know, the people that are going to do the best during this collapse are going to be the ones who have disassociated from the mortgages, have taken their money out of the corporate, taken their need to thrive, their tools of thriving out of the corporate system, are working more with the local community back and forth, are heavily in repair and maintenance. Because that's what I mean. Look at Cuba. Cuba was like, just, there was nothing in Cuba for all those years. They couldn't get anything. But what did they have? They had these bitchin' old cars, and they just kept them running forever, you know? So that may be the kind of world that we're heading into, where repair and maintenance is top dog, and new parts, all these, you know, cheap Chinese knockoffs, I wouldn't call it that, but, you know, all these cheap Chinese parts that we're so used to having, those are not available anymore. Man, I forgot what I needed to bring here. I'm super bummed. Okay, I'm here. Thanks. I hope that was